The Giants have offered 13 different players UDFA contracts. Those are undrafted free agents, for those of you who were unaware. And not all of them have signed yet. They have until May 9th and 10th, which is the rookie mini camp, to go ahead and sign. Yesterday, we talked a lot about the offense. Let's talk about some defensive players that they have either signed already or they have offered these UDFA contracts to. So, like I said, the Giants have brought in about 13. Every once in a while, you get a player who ends up sticking and works out well. Sometimes they end up even playing, like, of course, Tommy DeVito, the most recent famous one, Elijah Chapman, who's a defensive lineman, and even Tomon Fox, who was an edge rusher. So every once in a while, there's a guy who makes it. So I always think it's interesting to talk a little bit about these guys so we know who they are. And today we're going to talk a bit about some defensive players. So one of the players that they did already sign is a cornerback from the University of South Carolina. Go Cox. I am an alum, for those of you who don't know. And his name is O'Donnell Fortune. So let's talk a little bit about him. So he is 6 feet tall, 185 pounds. And he was actually the Shrine Bowl MVP this year. So he overall has had a pretty decent college career. Again, played at University of South Carolina. And the number one thing that I want to highlight, because this is something that we have talked about extensively in the Joe Schoen era, but it has been most prevalent this year with the guys that he brought in free agency and the players that they have drafted. One of the number one things that he has talked about that all of the players have are good instincts. And O'Donnell Fortune is a player who has very good instincts. He has good awareness, good processing. He's a fluid and efficient mover on the field, all things that should translate well from college to the NFL. So in his 2 years at South Carolina, he had 9 pass deflections, 5 interceptions, and 1 forced fumble. So good experience there. I would say the one thing that he is not the best at, which I think at this point in your careers, you're probably not improving upon, is just his athleticism. He's just not the most athletic guy out there. And, it's probably one of the reasons why he didn't end up going drafted and ended up becoming an undrafted free agent. So athleticism is a question for him, but he is quick to transition between a cover corner and a run defender. So again, versatility is the common theme with every single one of these Giants players, I swear. So his size, processing, burst, and hair trigger playing downhill could make him an intriguing candidate for a move to free safety. So curious to see if that's something that Shane Bowen and the defensive staff end up doing with him this spring. But he obviously played in college as a corner, but, curious to see if they kind of do any type of flexibility there, versatility, moving him around. The last note that I have here on Fortune is he doesn't have the athletic ability to really stick with players in man coverage, but he also has a little bit of an issue running with them down the field. So again, that's where the athleticism is going to come into play. Like, for all we complain about with Tay Banks, he is able to keep up with wide receivers and has decent speed. And I think that's something that Fortune is lacking and is going to be an issue in the NFL, especially as a corner. And he does have a hard time recovering if he's initially beaten. So, that's why these guys are undrafted free agents. You got to bring them in for these cheap contracts and see what they can end up doing. So a guy to definitely watch, because the Giants did sign him already. So when we find out whatever his number is going to be, we'll keep you posted and see how he does throughout minicamp and the summer during training camp. Now, the last 2 guys that we're going to talk about today have been offered UDFA contracts, but they have not signed anything yet. So the first one is cornerback RJ Delancy. So he is from Wisconsin, 5'10", 196 pounds. And one thing that I want to say too when it comes to these guys is there are so many players coming out of college who end up declaring for the draft. We are talking over 1,000 players. So not every one of them, especially these guys who go undrafted, have the same type of profiles, obviously, as guys who go in the first round or even guys who go in the 5th and 6th round. So I don't have a ton of information on RJ Delancy because of that, but I will share with you what you have. And then on the contrary, Makari, Paige, I have a lot of bullet points about, and honestly, I had to scale it down because I could have given you a lot more, but try to keep these videos to a reasonable amount of time. So anyway, Delancey, not a ton of information about him, but the one thing you do need to know about him is this guy is fast. He ran a 4.4 40 time, which for a cornerback is pretty damn good. So he's got the speed that O'Donnell Fortune is lacking. So 2 guys to keep your eyes on in camp if Delancey does end up signing this contract, because they probably will be in the rotation together and will be competing against each other. So another guy who entered the transfer portal, as I'm doing research on these guys, I am amazed that majority of them, it's like started here, transferred here. The transfer portal is a whole nother ball game, but it's just wild all over the place. Anyway, Delancey played at 3 different schools. He started at Nebraska for 1 year, his first year in college, and then he went to Toledo where he played 3 years, and then he ended up moving over to Wisconsin. So one thing that I want to point out about Delancey is that being at Toledo, he obviously is going to have crossover and experience playing with defensive lineman Darius Alexander, who the Giants drafted in the 3rd round, pick number 65, who's a guy that I love. We've talked a lot about him already. But another guy who obviously you're going to have that relation in Toledo. And something that I find interesting is that Darius Alexander, extremely loyal, spent all 6 years at Toledo. And, he had the option to go to the transfer portal and go nowhere else. And he said, I am loyal, honey. I am staying. And I love that about him. Delancey, on the other hand, said not so much. So after 3 years at Toledo, he ended up finishing college at Wisconsin. He played in 11 games, made 7 tackles, and he played defense and special teams. So obviously that versatility that, the Giants seem to love so much. So that's all I have on RJ Delancy, and we'll keep you guys posted if he ends up signing a contract. And again, if there's any more information to divulge about him. Now, let's move along to Makari Paige, because like I said, a lot of info about him. He is someone who spent all 4 years at Michigan. So one thing that I want to point out with him too is that during his time at Michigan, I think he had 3 different defensive coordinators. So every year he was essentially learning a different defensive scheme. And the last one, of course, was with Wink Martindale. So he has experience in Wink's system, which obviously a lot of those Michigan players, of course, did. But I want to highlight that because I do think that, as a college player, and when you talk to some of these guys when they're coming out of college, the intelligence and smartness is such a necessity from this front office that I can see why they brought in someone like Paige, because having to learn those different defenses year after year in college is obviously taxing. It's a lot to learn, and to be able to, step in week 1 and play well is not something that's easy. So anyway, he was a safety at Michigan, 6'4", 208 pounds. He had 45 tackles, 23 solo, 4 pass deflections, and 2 interceptions. So because he obviously played in quite a few different schemes over his time at Michigan, he's another guy who played in a bunch of different spots. So he's played stacked in the box, he's played nickel, deep safety, he's kind of been all over the field. So again, that versatility aspect, which we know the Giants love so much. He played in 48 games with 27 starts, earning all Big Ten honorable mentions in 2022 and 2023. He is a reliable tackler. If you've ever watched Giants football in the last 5 years, we all know that's a problem. So immediately love this about Paige. So the guy's a good tackler, because God knows we could use some of that on defense. He's got plus length for the position, impressive wingspan, and natural pad level that help maintain leverage against tight ends. Obviously, in the NFL, he's going to go against some really damn good ones. We can talk about ones in the division alone. Dallas Goedert, ring a bell. So, I don't think that he's going to end up being a starter. Like I said, you never know with these UDFAs. Some of them could end up being that. I don't think he's going to outplay anyone that's currently on the Giants roster. But like I said, you never know. And if, God forbid, anyone goes down, I want to feel like maybe a safety is going to be able to match up decently against the tight ends in the NFC East. He's good at exhibiting advanced pattern recognition skills when operating in zone coverage. We know how Shane Bowen loves his zone coverage, particularly from 2 high safety alignments. So, we've talked a lot about what we want to see Shane Bowen do differently, and time will tell if he listens to all of us. He's got clean footwork transitioning from the back pedal to the brake, showing corner-like fluidity despite safety frame. So, does have a couple things to work on. Hip tightness shows up in sudden direction changes, particularly when matched against shifty slot receivers. I will not continue to go on about the players that he's going to have to go up against in the NFC East, because we know. And lastly, needs to develop more urgency, triggering downhill against outside run plays from deep alignment. So overall, it sounds like he has good traits, good qualities, good instincts, all things that the Giants are looking for, and then obviously some things to improve upon. So like I said, we will see if any of these guys end up signing the deals and becoming potential options for the Giants in the future. You never know. But what I do love is that the Giants are continually trying to make this roster better, bringing in competition at all levels of play, which is so important. And we'll see how it all shows up in the summer. So hit that subscribe button because there's more UDFAs coming this week.